What's up? Happy, what day is it? Wednesday.
Wednesday.
March 1st.
What's your favorite day?
Fucking hump day. Let's do it. Still here in Denver, beautiful Denver. It is freezing, like
Who'd you
absolutely
see
freezing.
yesterday? What'd you get?
Oh, got some swag. Shout out to the Krypton crew. They had a great little event. Also went to the Medici event, which was a lot of fun. Medici events are always great. They're kind of like the best secret society in crypto. It's always a lot of fun though. A lot of great people there. There's not a whole lot of people from each entity there, which is really cool because it encourages networking in a way that doesn't exist in other places, which is really interesting. What else? Drove around Denver to the wrong address for 2 different events, which was great. Mainly Google Maps problems rather than anything else. But
do you mean user error problems?
Yep.
Yeah, cool.
that is what I mean. But it was a lot of fun. Got some really cool stuff going on today. Have a lunch with a great group, Nirvana Labs. We are throwing axes with the Arrington Capital group, so that'll be fun. I'm pretty sure I'm a pro at throwing axes. I think if I had to guess.
I mean, you're a pro at throwing shade, so like just bring that and emulate it.
Throwing anything, yeah. Fuck yeah, I'm good. So that should be fun. Have not made it to the conference yet.
Yesterday, Metis had Froyo, so I had Froyo FOMO, and I was hoping that you'd gone.
Yeah, I'll get you some FOMO videos today. We'll share some FOMO videos because we're gonna end up there today. We've got
end up there because you didn't go there for it.
Yeah, well, it's funny because this year, this is the first year I've had a ticket. I come every year, but I never have a ticket to anything really. I don't usually go in the conference. I think we talked about this.
Yeah.
But there are some pretty good headline speakers at ETH Denver, of course, and we got to fill the closet with crypto swag. So got wicked hoodies yesterday. Went to an 80s party. They had headbands and like those. Remember those like glasses that had all the like, I don't know, things across them. It was cool. It's fun.
So since you're in Denver, should we talk about the Scammy McScammerson that's happening in Colorado? Oh yeah, I do know where Denver is for the record.
Yeah, everybody, we were getting messages. At least I was wondering like where I found you and like how you made it onto like a podcast and all this
this
shit.
Woman read a map or a book?
Yeah, like
Denver, Alabama. FBI report shows FBI report shows Colorado residents getting duped by crypto scams.
Yeah, I think this is like, it's not necessarily it's kind of funny, but it's actually true. Crypto scams are like real, right?
Oh yeah.
I mean, anybody that's been around long enough that tells you that they haven't been duped is lying. I've been duped for, I hate to admit it, but a lot. Well over $300,000 cumulatively over the last decade in doing business on blockchain and crypto and different things. I mean, in hindsight, there's some obvious lessons. Clearly, like everything is always obvious in hindsight. Well, not always, but often obvious in hindsight. But yeah, these crypto scams, like this in particular, people will essentially what they're doing in Colorado, but this isn't unique. And the reason we're talking about this today, I think it's important for people just to think about this. Just think about the security. I learned yesterday from someone very, very, very well known, decades and decades in successful Web2 exits. I learned yesterday, after all this time of using the QR code scanner on Telegram, that there's actually a super easy way for people to use their QR code to actually then have access to your phone indefinitely. I didn't even know that. And we spent a lot of time on OPSEC, so operational security. So I didn't even know that. Like, granted, nothing useful is on this phone. Like the one that I carry around and all that stuff is.
It's also like the least secure thing we carry around, our phones. We put so much data and information on them, and then we just like tap them on things.
Yeah, so I guess what we're trying to get across by this is not necessarily the FUD nature of this, because it's just part of the gig. But if you take a step back and zoom out and say, why do people try crypto scams? Well, think about it. years and years and years ago, in the early 1900s and all the way up till 2000, essentially, maybe not quite up till 2000, but bank robberies were like a real thing, right? Like people would go into the bank with their guns and they'd risk their lives and probably risk the lives of others, and in many cases take the lives of others for, tens of thousands or $100,000. And it was like a real thing, like Bonnie and Clyde, of course. Like we can talk about all the like kind of stories of the past, but it was a real thing. Bank robberies were a real thing, probably far before the 1900s. There was bank robberies all over. In blockchain and crypto, you can do it remotely, anonymously, generally, and then up until the last little bit. I mean, getting the fiat out of crypto wasn't that difficult. Now, I mean, it's a heck of a lot more difficult. So we're seeing the proliferation of a lot of these white hat platforms. Immunify is a good example. We're big fans of Immunify. We use them for lots of projects. But it gives the would-be hackers potentially a respectable and meaningful outlet to actually, instead of stealing and then having to figure out how to illegally try to fence the cash into fiat, they can just white hat it and earn about the same. There's estimates that suggest about 80 to 90% of the value is lost in the fencing process. Generally speaking, most of the bounties for meaningful bugs and exploits is about 15% of what could have been exploited. That's just a rough number, 10 to 15%. So they end up as well off if they go the white hat route. But a lot of people don't know that, right? Like there's a lot of scams that happen. Most Telegram channels, all of our Telegram channels, there's clones of us, people that, that all the time going into people's, anytime someone asks a question, they go into their DMs. Like that's why no protocol founders, like here's the rule. If somebody claims to be an admin or a founder or a team member of a protocol and they message you first, they're probably lying.
Okay.
That's it. Like be skeptical. And so I don't think you should be skeptical of the space, but I think you should be skeptical of people in the space and links and all of this. So anyways, back to this article before we move on.
Something that I think is interesting about this is we always anticipate that there's going to be like a really sophisticated scam, right? That people are going to go out of their way and they're going to trick you and it's going to be super complicated. And actually, especially in this one and also in the ones that I have been duped in, it's just my lack of critical thinking or kind of like you said, not understanding the space well enough and thinking that, JD was actually messaging me and it, was a scammer or something to that end. But in this particular scenario, just directly from the article, in this common scenario, the victim is approached on social media, dating app, or discussion forum with a crypto investment opportunity. They're then directed to link their phone number and set up an investment account. And this is the scam. The link or the phone number is totally controlled and it's fictitious. You transfer funds into it and then they are gone. They ghost you, right? And they say that these have involved stable coins like Tether. They have stolen more than $600,000 from a 52-year-old man, $1.3 million from a 61-year-old woman in Denver, $350,000 from a 62-year-old man in Evergreen, $1.2 million from a couple in their 40s. Like they're really making bank, but it isn't that complicated, right? They're just physically phishing.
Yeah, that's what's kind of shitty about it. I mean, they're not super sophisticated, but they're incredibly persistent. Like to be able to get, if you think about what it would take probably to get a 61-year-old individual, man or woman, doesn't matter. In this case, it was a woman. But you get a 61-year-old person to deposit 1.3 million. Like generally speaking, that doesn't happen from a simple random message. Like they've probably invested a good amount of time and effort in, kind of grooming, for lack of a better phrase, the targets, right? There are some sophisticated scams. Like, I mean, I was duped largely by a very sophisticated scam. Like they had.
Just keep telling yourself that.
No, they had cloned. Yeah, they had cloned the Swift transfer system and a bank interface and like a whole bunch of weird shit. Like it was kind of crazy. But anyways, the point is, and to your point, sometimes it's not that sophisticated. It's just opportunistic, right? And so anyways, the moral of telling this story is that really sucks. And your heart has to go out for people that, that lose, especially larger amounts to pure scams. I mean, FTX and all of these kind of, fraudulent situations obviously your heart goes out to them too. It's a little different though, because at least most of that, an objective person would have assumed generally that that was probably a fairly safe place, but a lot of this stuff, you're like, just,
But it's not anything new. I mean, they're using the same tactics as the, Nigerian prince forward this message to 1,000 people and give me your transaction details. They're using the same tactics as, hey, I've met you before. Don't you remember me? I'm your friend Sam from this place you used to live. They've done a little bit of LinkedIn or Facebook research. People are surprised at how visible their data is, especially if they don't keep up on their data. And we have a lot of, this will sound silly, but we have a lot of older millennials who are kind of graduating into middle age, and they're not as tech savvy now, right? They started tech savvy. They have a lot of information online. They're not maintaining their security over that information. And so it's easy to target them.
Yeah.
Listen, this is not hacker advice. This is just like empathy.
Yeah. I think, again, like, moral of the story here, and it's probably enough on this one, but moral of the story, just be somewhat skeptical. People you don't know, reach out for investment opportunities. Like, come on. The chances of someone you don't know reaching out to you with this crazy life-changing investment opportunity, like, come on, honestly. And if it seems too good to be true, it probably is. That, like, there's no such thing as a free lunch. So anything that seems like way outsized opportunity on the surface and someone's telling you about it, like, with conviction, they're probably lying. Obviously there's exceptions to all of that, but be careful. That's all. All right.
With kindness, I know that you want to move on, but with kindness, we can remember to ask your friends. I know that sounds funny. We talk a lot about do your own research, but if you aren't sure about something, but you don't want to pass up some kind of opportunity, you have other friends in crypto. Just ask, right?
Yeah.
I catch myself on this. I get DMs all the time that are like, do you guys want to list here? And I can't tell if it's real. So I ask some of our peers and see if they've heard of it or if they know what it is or what have you. And most of the time it's fake. And then occasionally it is real, but I'm glad that I did my due diligence, right?
Yeah. I mean, a lot, especially those listing things. Like,
you can make fun of me all you want, JD, but
no,
I'm too optimistic.
I'm not making fun of you, but these listing things are hilarious because at Benki, as an example, we're listed on pretty much every major exchange, and we get people that claim to be representing many of the exchanges we're already listed on reaching out to us because they've identified that we're a perfect fit for their exchange and and I always kind of play with them in response because for some reason it's funny. All right. All good. Just the other thing, I guess, is maybe don't be shy about your stories, right? Like, I've seen quite a few people, respectable people in the space, that have been hacked or clicked on a phishing link or something, and they're telling the story publicly, and I think that's important too. Like, I came on here, not that it's the big pat on my back, and suggested that I've lost well over 300 grand in scams. Like, none of us are immune to it, no matter how long you're around. And so I think share the story too. Like, if weird shit happens, or if you encounter something that you identify as a scam, share it. Show it on Twitter. Let's show it in Telegram. Let's make sure we're doing our part to protect people from this nonsense.
Yeah, do your own research with your friends.
With your friends.
You ready? We are ready for this next one.
Let's do it. Oh yeah.
Binance US restructuring plan.
Yeah, this is an interesting one. I think in terms of who has the wherewithal to take over some of these restructuring, some of these companies. I mean, there's not a whole lot of potential suitors, right? Especially in the US. There's only a few that have the appropriate regulatory infrastructure, I guess, for lack of a better phrase, and Binance US is one of them. And I think at first there was quite a bit of apprehension. I mean, if you followed the news or followed the sentiment around this, it seemed like people were pretty against this. I think even the regulators, to a certain extent, have filed objections to this restructuring plan. So we'll have to see how it plays out. But that's a fairly sizable level of support. So you can't ignore it. But then the obvious challenges kind of exist. Like, are we concentrating risk even more by allowing a few massive incumbents to to own the market.
Mhm.
And I mean, FTX was obviously trying to do that. But they were trying to kingmake themselves via regulation and essentially make it so that no one else could meaningfully compete in the US regulated market. I mean, I'm not sure Binance US is doing the same thing specifically, but I think, from a business perspective, purely business perspective, the goal is to corner the market as much as you can and to create a moat around your business model. And I think from Binance's perspective, they have a ton of cash, a ton of liquidity, and the capacity to quickly scoop up these assets at discount prices. So if we take all of the do we love the philosophy of Binance, taking over the Voyager's assets and so on, I think maybe that's secondary to the fact that it's still important. Like if they don't restructure this, if they don't auction off the assets in a meaningful way, the users stand to lose even more than they already will. This creates a light at the end of the tunnel, I suppose, for a lot of those users that thought they had lost a lot of money to maybe at some point be made a little bit more whole. I don't know the specifics, but I think it's interesting. It'll be interesting to see how this plays out because we will get more information from regulators, I think, based on what's in their objections. I haven't read the filings, but probably should. It's interesting to see. It would be interesting to see what some of the major objections to this are. I'm assuming it's probably antitrust or something that's to do with monopolies, but I have no idea, to be honest. And I think that will be interesting because whatever comes of this, however this shakes out in the end, forget all the nonsense in the middle, lawsuits and filings and all this other. That's just typical legalese. But in the end, whatever ends up happening, I think will give us a lot more insight to how regulators are viewing the market going forward. What I'd love to see on this in particular are there's a lot of other assets being auctioned off through the myriad of bankruptcies and insolvencies that happened. But I would love to see smaller entities, smaller institutions partner with financing partners or TradFi or large investment funds that they have the firepower to go and restructure this stuff and do it in a way that's again maybe more focused on creating a separate and successful business model, not necessarily just adding to the behemoths. But again, I will be pleased, I suppose, in either way. I don't have a horse in the race with Voyager, so I'll be pleased either way just to see that the users, again, hopefully, regardless of what happens, the users have some path to recovery, at least as best as possible. I don't know what that looks like, but yeah, definitely interesting to follow. I think it'll be key to watch how that plays out.
Path to recovery is kind of an interesting statement there, but I do want to say that whether it's because they haven't been presented with better options or not, the vast majority of people accepted this deal. So it's not like it's split. It's not like a lot of people are particularly unhappy with what they're getting. And I think that's important to note is they're pleasing most people, right?
Yeah. I mean, what I think when I see that is how many of these people might be desperate? How many of these people are just hoping that they're probably looking at this going, well, shit, if Binance US doesn't buy us out, who's going to, right? Because there's not, like I said, there's not a whole lot of parties that have the capacity to do that unless you were to partner on a huge joint venture or something with a fairly liquid investment fund or something. You'd have to have a really good track record of turning around these types of companies, but I'm sure they can find. There's a lot of people globally that have that experience. So,
but are they shy from crypto? Sentiment's been,
Yeah, so sentiment's always flopping around a little bit. I mean, there's some crypto native VCs or crypto heavy VCs that have way more firepower than we could imagine. So we'll have to see. Again, there's it's a bit of a double-edged sword. The leveraged buyout scenario, which is what happened to distressed companies lots throughout history. It doesn't happen as much now, although it still does. There's a lot of negative caused by that too, for in some cases, for users, for companies, for company value. A few small entities or big entities now make most of the upside, and the users and the previous owners are there holding the bags. So we'll have to see. Definitely interesting. I think it'll be fun to see what the regulators, fun is probably the wrong term, but I'm curious to see how the regulators handle this in the end.
This next one is kind of cool. It's not really about regulators, but it is about how things are going to be handled in the future. So Larry Fink says tokens are the next generation for markets. And I love this one. There's all kinds of, if you check out the actual article, the Forbes article, there's all kinds of interviews with Larry Fink and Jonathan Larson and major players who are talking about what crypto and digital assets will actually mean to financial institutions, which is not just a new type of currency or a new type of fund, right?
Absolutely. I mean, Larry Fink, of course, love him or hate him, he's the CEO of BlackRock, the largest investment fund in the world, or largest investment company in the world, not fund, but smart guy, love him or hate him. I definitely have some criticism of their approach to housing in the US and what's happening. They're buying up all the farmland and all the residential land all across the United States, especially in a lot of these opportunity zones and different things where there's really crazy tax advantages and different opportunities that most people can't take part in, but they have the capital to do so. They're also pushing ESG and all this other nonsense that whatever. It's a totally different conversation. But in this particular case, I think what's notable here is that even as recent as 3 years ago, these guys were all skeptics. Like no one really prominent in the traditional finance world, other than a few people that staked their claim in crypto early. Very few of these TradFi participants are saying, yeah, crypto's the future 3 years ago. Now you're seeing, some of the largest players in the world. We talked, I think, yesterday about Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, a lot of these large institutions leaning in heavily to blockchain and the future of blockchain tech. I think Larry Fink, again, what he's suggesting isn't necessarily that Bitcoin and some of these other assets will be the future of transactions and payments. They've obviously got a bias to a lot of their portfolio companies that exist in Web 2 and TradFi. But I think, that he's got a good point. He thinks that a lot of real world assets, whatever that is, most assets will be tokenized and digitized. And I tend to agree. I think, if you look purely from an economics perspective, capitalism strives over time to get better and to create more profit potential while continuing to manage and mitigate cost. And blockchain just it's a paradigm shift of overhead management for a lot of these institutions, and it opens the door to a whole ton more flexibility and access to totally different markets and new markets of investors and individuals. I mean, obviously I'm biased, but I agree completely. And I think it's nice to see a major publication like Forbes, who sometimes I disagree with a lot of the crap that they post, but it's nice to see notable people and notable publications, not always fudding everything. So it's, today on Go FUD Yourself, shout out to
not
Forbes.
So funny. Yeah.
shout out to Forbes and Larry Fink. Maybe we'll get him on the podcast one day. I'm just going to keep calling out famous people and eventually.
Hopefully you have to tag them on Twitter too, though, JD. I think that's how that works.
Yeah. Because they're gonna respond. But anyways, someday we'll have all these people on the show. But definitely shout out to them. It's good. It brings some positive momentum in the wake of the fuddy nonsense that we hear every day. So that's that. Ceara.
That's that.
That's that. Go FUD yourself.
Happy Wednesday. Go FUD yourself.
Happy Wednesday. We'll be back tomorrow. Same time, same place. 12:30 East. We are